The sun beat down on the dusty square of a small frontier town in Arizona. The air was thick with the scent of horse sweat, dry earth, and the low hum of a restless crowd. Eliza Montgomery, a woman in her late 20s with a steady gaze and a quiet strength, stood on the periphery, her hands clasped tightly. She wasn't here for the spectacle, but for a man she'd seen being dragged through the town earlier that morning, an Apache warrior, his face painted with a somber resolve, his body bruised and weary, but his eyes holding a fire she couldn't ignore. The auctioneer, a corpulent man with a booming voice and a cruel grin, stood on a makeshift stage. "Look at this one, folks!" he bellowed, gesturing to the man on the block. "A savage! Caught raiding a supply wagon! He's been mocked as a wild animal, a brute, but I see a man worth saving." The crowd jeered, their words a barrage of insults and prejudice. "Let's start the bidding at $50. Eliza's heart pounded. She had come to the West to escape the suffocating expectations of her high society life in Boston, to find a place where she could build something of her own. She had inherited a small ranch from her late uncle, a modest piece of land that was all she had left. She wasn't wealthy, but she had saved every penny. She knew the $50 was a fortune to most, but her gaze was fixed on the man. His name, she learned, was Cale. His proud posture, despite the chains, spoke of a dignity that was being brutally stripped away. A man in a worn-out trapper's coat raised a hand. 55, 60, a saloon owner called out. The price climbed slowly. Eliza felt a knot of dread tighten in her stomach. She watched the man, Kyle, his head held high. He seemed to be looking through the crowd, not at them, as if they were a fleeting nuisance. It was that defiance, that deep, silent strength that sealed her decision. $100, she announced, her voice trembling slightly but clear enough to cut through the noise. All eyes turned to her. A woman alone in the West was a rarity, and a woman bidding on a savage was unheard of. The trapper scoffed. "Lady, you want a pet? Get a dog. That one will kill you in your sleep." Eliza ignored him. She met the auctioneer's gaze. $100, she repeated firmly. The man seemed surprised, but $100 was a good sum. After a brief pause, he slammed his gavel down. "Sold to the lady for $100. The crowd's murmur turned into a low, resentful buzz. Kyle, still chained, finally looked at her. His eyes, a deep, warm brown, met hers with a mix of suspicion and something akin to a question. She felt a connection, an understanding that transcended their starkly different worlds. She had bought him, not as a slave, but as a man she intended to free. Eliza paid the auctioneer, her savings gone, but her resolve unwavering. The men who had captured Kyle were wary. "He's your problem now, missy," one of them sneered, unfastening the chains from his hands but leaving the leg irons on. "You'll be wise to keep him shackled." "He will be shackled as long as he poses a threat," Eliza said calmly, though her heart was pounding. She motioned for Cale to follow her. He did, the heavy chains clanking with every step. She led him to her wagon, a simple, sturdy vehicle piled with supplies. "I need to get some more provisions before we leave," she told him, her voice low. "You can wait in the back. No one will bother you." He didn't respond, just climbed into the back of the wagon with a silent grace that belied his chains. As she walked away, she felt his eyes on her. The suspicion was still there, but so was a flicker of curiosity. She bought flour, coffee, and other essentials, her mind racing. How would she explain this to her ranch hands? How would she convince Kyle that her intentions were honorable? Back at the wagon, she found him sitting still, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "I'm not going to keep you as a slave," she said, without preamble. "I bought you to set you free." He finally spoke, his voice a low, gravelly sound. "And why would you do that, white woman? You think to gain a servant's gratitude?" "I don't think to gain anything," she replied. "I saw a man being humiliated. You deserve better. I can't just set you free here. They'd hunt you down. I need to get you to my ranch where you will be safe. I can give you a place to stay while you recover. You can leave whenever you are able." His silence was a heavy, thoughtful thing. He didn't believe her, not fully, but something in her eyes, in her simple words, seemed to give him pause. He simply nodded and looked away. The journey to her ranch was long and silent. She offered him water and a piece of bread, which he accepted without a word. She noticed how he watched the landscape, his eyes scanning for every movement, every sign of danger. He was a survivor, a man of the wild, and she, a woman from the city, was a strange, unpredictable variable in his world. The sun was setting as they reached her ranch, a small but functional homestead nestled against a backdrop of rolling hills. A small wooden house, a barn, and a few corrals made up the whole. Her ranch hands, two older men named Silas and Jed, were sitting on the porch, their rifles resting against the wall. They looked up as she approached, their faces etched with concern. "Eliza, are you all right?" Silas asked, his eyes scanning her. "We heard—" His words trailed off as Cale emerged from the wagon. The sight of the Apache warrior still in chains brought a wave of silent tension. Jed's hand instinctively went to his rifle. "Silas, Jed, this is Cale," Eliza said, her voice steady. "He's not a prisoner, not in the way you think. I bought him. I intend to set him free." "You bought him?" Silas's voice was filled with a mix of disbelief and anger. "Eliza, are you mad? He's a savage. He'll turn on you the first chance he gets." "He's a man," Eliza insisted, her gaze firm. "I'm asking you to trust me. I need your help. He's still shackled. We need to get the irons off him." Silas and Jed exchanged a long look. They had worked for her uncle for years and had a deep, almost paternal bond with Eliza. They had seen her grow into a capable, independent woman, but this was a test of their loyalty, unlike any other. Finally, Silas sighed and nodded. "All right, Eliza, but if he so much as looks at you wrong, he's getting a bullet." They led Cale to the barn. With tools and a little brute force, they managed to pry the irons off his legs. The moment he was free, Cale stretched his limbs, the relief evident on his face. He didn't try to run or attack. He simply stood there, a quiet, powerful presence. Eliza handed him a change of clothes, a pair of old trousers and a simple shirt. He took them without a word. "You can stay in the barn for tonight," she said, her voice softer now. "I'll bring you some food. We'll talk in the morning." As she walked away, Kyle watched her go, a million thoughts running through his mind. She was unlike any white person he had ever met. She had given him back his dignity, a chance to breathe. He still did not trust her completely, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of hope. He was a man mocked as a savage, but she, a stranger, had seen a man worth saving. Days turned into a week. The initial tension between Kyle, Silas, and Jed slowly began to dissipate. Kyle kept to himself, working on odd jobs around the ranch. He was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He fixed a loose fence post with a skill that surprised them. He mended a broken wagon wheel with an ingenuity that left Silas grumbling in grudging admiration. Eliza would bring him food, and they would sit together, not talking, but sharing a space of quiet understanding. She told him about her past, her life in Boston, the expectations she had to leave behind. He listened, his gaze steady and thoughtful. She learned that he had a family, a wife and a daughter, but he never spoke of them. The pain was too deep, the memory too fresh. One evening, as a storm was rolling in, the sky turning a bruised purple, Eliza found Cale sharpening a knife in the barn. "I'm not going to run," he said without looking up. "Not yet. I need to get strong. I need to be ready." "Ready for what?" she asked. He finally met her gaze. "To go back, to my people, to find my family, if they are still alive." Eliza felt a pang of sadness. She knew this was coming. He was a free man. He belonged to his people. "I will help you," she said. "I can give you a horse, provisions, whatever you need." He shook his head. "Not yet. I need to be stronger, and I need to understand why you would do this, why you would risk so much for a man you do not know." "We are not so different, Kyle," she said, her voice soft. "We have both been stripped of our worlds. We are both trying to find our way back." He said nothing, but a flicker of a smile touched his lips. It was the first time she had seen him smile. It transformed his face, and for a moment she saw the man beneath the warrior, the man who had loved a wife and a daughter, the man who had lost everything. The local town, still bitter about Eliza's purchase of Kyle, was a powder keg of resentment. Word had spread that she had a savage on her ranch. The trapper who had lost the bid, a man named Granger, was the most vocal. He rode out to Eliza's ranch one afternoon, a few of his cronies with him. "You're harboring a killer, Eliza," Granger yelled, his face red with fury. "He'll murder you and burn your ranch to the ground. Hand him over, and we'll deal with him properly." Eliza stood on the porch, Silas and Jed behind her. "He is not a killer," she said, her voice ringing with defiance. "He is a man who was wronged. You will leave my property now." Granger sneered. "Or what? You'll sick your little savage on us." Suddenly, Kyle emerged from the barn, his presence a silent challenge. He was a head taller than Granger, his shoulders broad, his gaze unwavering. He didn't carry a weapon, but his posture was a clear warning. The men with Granger shifted uncomfortably. They had heard tales of Apache warriors. "Get out," Cale said, his voice low and dangerous, "or I will be forced to teach you some manners." Granger's eyes narrowed. "You'll pay for this, white woman," he spat, and the men turned their horses and rode away, defeated but not cowed. Eliza felt a wave of relief wash over her. She turned to Kyle, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "You did not have to save me," he replied. "A debt of life is not a small thing. I will not allow them to harm you." His words, simple and direct, were a shield and a promise. A new dynamic had been established. He was no longer just a guest. He was her protector, and she, in turn, was his. The weeks that followed were filled with a comfortable silence. Kyle worked with a quiet purpose, and Eliza found herself seeking his company more and more. She would sit with him in the evenings, watching the stars, and they would talk. He told her about the Apache way of life, about the land, the spirits, the stories of his ancestors. He taught her how to track an animal, how to read the clouds. Eliza, in turn, taught him to read and write. She brought out old books, her fingers tracing the words as she explained their meaning. He was a quick study, his mind sharp and his focus absolute. They shared stories, not just of their pasts, but of their dreams for the future. He spoke of a peaceful life with his family, she of a simple ranch and a life of her own. One afternoon, as they were mending a fence, a sudden downpour caught them by surprise. They ran for the cover of the barn, their clothes soaked. As they stood there laughing, the air between them shifted. The rain drummed on the tin roof, and the world outside seemed to fade away. Eliza's gaze met his. There was a warmth in his eyes she hadn't seen before, a tenderness that made her heart skip a beat. He reached out and gently brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. His touch was electric, and for a moment they just stood there, the unspoken words hanging in the air. The feeling was new, fragile, and utterly terrifying. She was a woman from Boston. He was a warrior from the desert. The world would not approve, but in that moment, in the safety of the barn, with the rain falling outside, none of that mattered. The unspoken bond between them did not go unnoticed. Silas and Jed, while they had come to respect Cale, were wary. Granger, meanwhile, was spreading rumors in town, painting Eliza as a woman who had fallen under the spell of a savage. One evening, Jed approached Eliza. "Eliza, you're playing with fire," he said, his voice filled with concern. "That man, he's from a different world. People are talking. They say you're a disgrace." "What people say doesn't matter, Jed," Eliza replied, her voice firm. "Kyle is a good man. He's saved me more times than I can count." "That may be," Jed conceded, "but you're forgetting who he is. He's Apache. He belongs to his people. He'll leave you, Eliza, and you'll be left with a broken heart and a town that despises you." His words hit home. Eliza knew he was right. Kyle would leave. He had to. He had a life to go back to, a family to find. The love that was blossoming between them was a fragile, dangerous thing. She was falling for a man she knew she could not keep. The thought brought a dull ache to her chest. That night, she found Cale sitting by the fire, a solemn expression on his face. "Jed spoke to me," he said, his voice low. "He is right. I must leave soon. I have stayed too long." "You are a free man, Cale," she said, her voice filled with a pain she tried to hide. "You can leave whenever you want." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a sadness that mirrored her own. "You saved my life, Eliza, but I cannot stay. My place is with my people. The desert calls to me, but you will always be in my heart." The words hung in the air, a silent promise and a tearful goodbye. The next morning, Kyle was gone. He had left before sunrise, leaving behind a small carved horse, a traditional Apache gift. It was a token of his gratitude, a symbol of a promise he couldn't keep. Eliza found it on her pillow, and a wave of raw grief washed over her. She knew he had to go, but the suddenness of his departure left her reeling. Granger and his cronies, emboldened by Cale's absence, rode back to the ranch. This time, they came prepared. They set fire to the barn, the dry wood catching quickly, the flames roaring towards the sky. Silas and Jed ran out, their rifles ready, but they were outnumbered. "Where's your savage now, Eliza?" Granger yelled, a cruel smile on his face. "He left you to burn, just like I said he would." Eliza stood her ground, her face grim. She was not going to let them destroy everything she had built. She had faced down a prejudice-filled town, and she would face down these men now. She raised her uncle's old shotgun. "Get off my land!" she shouted, her voice trembling but clear. Just as the men were about to rush her, a sound cut through the air. The thunder of hooves, the war cry of a single man. Kyle, riding hard, a bow in his hand, his face a mask of fury. He had not left her to burn. He had been close by, watching, waiting for the right moment. He was not just a warrior, he was a protector. He dismounted with a powerful leap, his arrow aimed at Granger's heart. "You will not harm her," he said, his voice a low growl. "Leave this place, or you will find that you have a price to pay for your actions." Granger and his men, seeing the fire in his eyes and the determination in his stance, hesitated. They had heard tales of Apache warriors fighting with the ferocity of a wild animal. They didn't want to find out if the stories were true. Granger, with a final hateful glare, turned his horse and rode away, his men following close behind. The fire was extinguished, but the barn was a smoking ruin. Eliza looked at Cale, her heart swelling with a mix of gratitude and sorrow. He had come back for her. He had risked his freedom, his life, to save her ranch, to save her. "You should not have come back," she said, her voice filled with tears. "I could not leave you," he replied, his eyes filled with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "My place may be with my people, but my heart is here." with you." They stood there surrounded by the wreckage, the air thick with the smell of smoke. The impossible choice hung between them. He could stay and risk the hostility of the town, the prejudice of the world, or he could leave, and she would be left with a broken heart, a memory of a love she could never have. "Kyle," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "what do we do?" "We rebuild," he said simply. "We rebuild the barn, and we rebuild our lives, together." He didn't offer her a life without challenges, without hardship. He offered her a life with him. It was the most honest, the most beautiful proposal she had ever received. The townsfolk, witnessing the spectacle of Cale's return and his heroic act, were forced to re-evaluate their prejudice. Granger and his men were arrested, their hateful act of arson, a crime that could not be ignored. Eliza and Cale, together, began the long, arduous task of rebuilding the barn. Silas and Jed, their initial skepticism replaced by a profound respect, worked alongside them. The ranch became a place of quiet acceptance, a haven in a world of hostility. The locals, in their own way, began to change. They saw a man who had been called a savage, a man who had defied all expectations, a man who loved and protected with fierce loyalty. One afternoon, as the sun was setting, they stood on the porch, looking at the newly built barn, a testament to their love and perseverance. Cale's arm was around her waist, his touch a silent promise. "What will happen now?" she asked, her voice filled with a peaceful certainty. "We will face whatever comes," he said, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Together. He had not found his family, but he had found a new one. He had not gone back to his people, but he had found a place where he belonged. He had been a man mocked as a savage, but she, a woman who had seen his worth, had saved him, and in doing so had found her own salvation. Their story was not a fantasy, but a reality forged in the fires of conflict and prejudice, a testament to the power of love, the courage to defy convention, and the unwavering belief that some men, no matter their background, were indeed worth saving.